Hey guys, back with part three. All right, so I want to pick it up with one more sample body paragraph from a research paper. Same police torture in China essay. The average citizen seems indifferent to the plight of perpetrators of crime in China. Peerenboom, 2004, explains this phenomena as a result of increased social and economic inequality combined with moral crisis, resulting in strong public sentiments for greater punitiveness toward offenders. In his study, Peerenboom polled college students about their perception of offenders, and his results showed that even students who identify as left-leaning tend to support the harshest legal penalties for crime. As Peerenboom notes, the government's periodic strike card campaigns, which are often considered by scholars to be harsh, arbitrary, and extra-legal, are very popular with the public. These conclusions are supported by the work of Lowe, 2002, who found the domestic support for criminal prosecutions that were criticized as inhumane by international commentators. Okay, we're going to talk about the structure of this guy in a moment, but let me ask you first about one thing you can notice from the citations that I've highlighted in blue here. So note that we have the date after the first Peerenboom citation, but then Peerenboom appears two more times in this paragraph, and those times the paragraph does not actually include the date. Why might that be? I would argue that what we're looking at here is an example of citational efficiency, that we don't actually need the date to be repeated after Peerenboom in this same paragraph because we already know the date of that study. So if you have just hit your reader over the head with that information, you don't have to repeat it in the next sentence. So we can have the date first, and then we don't need it for those next two repetitions when we're in the same paragraph, right? We sort of hit a reset button when we move to the next paragraph. And then we bring in a new source with Lowe, 2002, and then we bring in the full citation there. Okay. So I want you to notice. So one thing I want you to notice. We're going to look at Bunce in a second, but one thing I want you to notice about all of these body paragraphs is that all of them are talking about more than one source. This is our example that that mostly focuses on one source. Like pretty much all of this paragraph is about this Peerenboom source. But notice the last sentence brings in another source. And I think that that's an interesting move. I think all of these paragraphs talk about at least two sources because that allows this writer to do that important move of synthesizing. So that because here's the thing, right? This paper is not just a report on sources, right? That's what your annotated bibliography is, right? On your annotated bibliography, you talk about each source separately, right? You're not making any attempt at the annotated bibliography stage to put the pieces together for your reader. But here's the thing: in the research paper, putting the sources, putting information together, connecting the dots, that's a huge task that you're undertaking. That's in fact why you write a research paper. You're doing this research, you're putting together the pieces in order to answer your research questions. So one thing you have to keep in mind when you are dealing with a whole bunch of sources is that it can be very tempting just to structure your paper so that you just have a paragraph on every source. But if you do that, you wind up letting your sources run the show. And your argument is not in charge of the paper anymore, right? So you need to synthesize your sources. You need to put the pieces together for your reader. And one way you can kind of check up on yourself to make sure that that's happening is to try in just about every body paragraph to mention at least two sources, to make sure that you talk about Peerenboom here, but you don't want it to make this paragraph is not just about Peerenboom. It's about its bun, right? This sort of bigger point. And so to sort of show that Peerenboom is not alone in thinking this, you bring in Lowe 2002. So this is something to keep in mind. It's not a hard and fast rule. Certainly, you might well have a paragraph or two that talks about just one source, but whenever possible, you want to try to make that synthesizing move by putting your sources together into the same paragraph. So let's take another step back here and think a little bit about the buns that we've observed. Here are the examples we've had from these different paragraphs we've been looking at. One thing you will immediately notice is that the buns do not have citations because the buns are working on another level, right? The bun, remember that the bun articulates the point of your paragraph that connects to your thesis. Every bun should tell us like the next step in proving your thesis. And one good way to sort of like another really good strategy for keeping yourself and your argument in charge of the structure of your paper, that is to say, a way to stop your sources from taking control of your paper away from you, is to try in just about every body paragraph to not have a citation in your bun, to make your bun work at a different level. So your bun is not about your sources. Your bun is about your point, right? The pervasive phenomenon of interrogational torture can also be attributed to the system of criminal justice that allows it to exist. Now, we know later in that paragraph you're going to go on to give us the evidence to back that up, but that sentence articulates the point. That is its purpose. Okay, so this is something to think about. Not having citations in your bun. So let's go over that one more time. So buns can be a great place where you do that work of synthesizing your sources that I was just talking about, right? Because they articulate the point, right? A point that you're going to back up by talking about more than one source. Whoops, sorry. Getting ahead of myself, now getting behind myself. Okay, so the buns articulate the major points. They may well not mention specific sources, the expectation being that the rest of the paragraph will fill in specific sources. They might mention specific sources so long as they also help to do some of that synthesizing work. Okay, cool. Here's an example of where you might mention a specific source in a bun, even though you're still doing some synthesizing work. So we have, at the beginning, we have like the end of a paragraph. Thus, their daughters are pushed into occupations that mold to their traditional gender expectations and comfort level. The next paragraph begins with the bun. Similarly, Evans and Diekman, 2009, also found that gender stereotypes are an important factor in career choice, but they added in a complicating factor, that choosing a gender-traditional career can sometimes be an expression of individuality. So notice that even though this bun mentions a specific source, it's still making an effort to synthesize, to put sources together, right? You can see that with the also, right? That also says, now this source, Evans and Diekman, found something very similar to what the previous source I just talked about found, right? So putting those sources together for us, really, really important. So let's all remember that. Your bun articulates the main point of your paragraph and it does some synthesizing work. It helps to put your sources together. Okay, so I want to talk next about using citations efficiently. This is like sort of the next step of advancement beyond just like putting the citations in. So you might not quite be ready to really internalize what I'm about to say, but you will be by a few days from now. So look at this. Random sentence pulled from a research paper. The percentage of the amount of children who read on a regular basis has dropped from 50% to only 18%. Zapisotsky, 2011, page 5. The amount of adolescents who smoke has tripled, and over 80% of adolescents drink alcoholic beverages. Citation. In fact, the exact same citation. So I don't know about you, but when I start to read this, I get a little antsy, because that citation is starting to get kind of ugly, right? It's repeated so often. I mean, it's technically correct, right? Like this person is telling us where the information came from. Technically correct. But remember I talked about citations being kind of more of an art than a science? This is a place of ugly citations, right? Ugly. Correct, but ugly. So how can we make them pretty? That'll be the next step, right? Not just correct, but pretty. So here's what we could do. According to Zapisotsky, 2011, the number of children who read on a regular basis has dropped, yada yada, while the number of adolescents who smoke has tripled. So, what I did there was to combine sentences and to use signal phrases to improve citational efficiency. So, when I had these two sentences in a row citing the exact same source, think about getting a signal phrase in there and think about combining sentences in order to make the sentence flow more smoothly and in order to like get yourself out of that problem of having to repeat the citation. So I say this in part not because I want you guys to focus a lot on this in the draft, but I'm going to be giving people comments. I guarantee I will give you guys comments about this kind of thing when after you turn in your draft of Essay 3, so that you'll know what I'm talking about there. Okay, so this is an example of like how to improve the prettiness, the artfulness of your citations. Okay. So, let me see if I was going to do this. All right. So, let's talk about, yeah, okay, so let's go back. We're going to talk, sorry, I was kind of trying to decide if I wanted to do what I thought I was going to do in this last section. So we're going to talk a little bit more today about the Papakarisi article. So this is one of the essays that you read for this unit. This was the one about democracy and online forums. So this is her abstract, which you have probably mostly looked at. But I want us to go. What I want to use this paper to do today is to think about the way that she's making her argument. Okay. The proponents of cyberspace promise that online discourse will increase political participation and pave the road for a democratic utopia. This article explores the potential for civil discourse in cyberspace by examining the level of civility in 287 discussion threads and political newsgroups. While scholars often use civility and politeness interchangeably, this study argues that this conflation ignores the democratic merit of robust and heated discussion. Therefore, civility was defined in a broader sense by identifying as civil behaviors that enhance democratic conversation. In support of this distinction, the study results revealed that most messages posted on political newsgroups were civil and further suggested that because the absence of face-to-face communication fostered more heated discussion, cyberspace might actually promote Lyotard's vision of democratic emancipation through disagreement and anarchy. Thus, this study supported the Internet's potential to revive the public sphere, provided that greater diversity and volume of discussion is present. Okay, so let's think about her thesis, right? I would argue that her thesis provides us with a pretty good example of what I was talking about at the beginning of this lecture. That is to say, the idea that we're looking for objective, analytical, complex theses. So, discussions on the internet are civil and promote the public sphere, but they do this despite being full of rudeness and disagreement, right? That's a complex claim. What it's not is something that is simplistic or mere opinion. Here's what it could have been, right? People on the internet are rude, internet comment threads should be shut down, cyberbullying is bad, gun violence is bad, legalizing marijuana is good or it's bad, right? Notice how much more complex her thesis is. How it's clearly taking into account both the good and the bad. So that is exactly what we're going through. Okay, in the next part we're going to look more in depth at Papakarisi's article.